What if I told you that the magic pill already exists and that you could have it right now? You just need the right keys to access it. No laboratory creates it, no pharmacy dispenses it, and no black market peddles it. But it has the power to heal your wounds faster, brighten your mood and your skin, to ward off the common cold. This pill can't be bottled. It can't be bought or sold. But you could have it right now.
Wow, I feel incredible.
Today we're going to be talking about sleep, why we need it, what happens when we don't get enough of it, and we're going to talk about some practical ways to get more and hopefully better quality sleep. But first, some housekeeping. And the notes I'm about to give don't just apply to this video, but will apply to all the videos that I make moving forward. Number 1. Suggestions versus dogma. The stuff I'll talk about isn't gospel. It's simply recommendations based on things I've learned along the way. But since and I dare say all of us, should never stop learning, any and all of the information that I talk about can, likely, will, and definitely should be updated and revised as we keep learning more. So expect to circle back from time to time as we try things out. And that brings us to our housekeeping note number 2. Try, test, retest, dump the rest. It's usually necessary to commit to a trial period when attempting any kind of behavioral change, whether it's big or small. You may have heard the phrase at some point that it takes 21 days to build a habit. Funny thing is, this was actually popularized by a plastic surgeon named Dr. Maltz, and it was based on his observational count of how long on average it took his patients to get used to their new faces. Researchers actually tested the theory, and based on their sample size, they found that it took anywhere from 18 to 254 days to form a new habit. Now that's a pretty big range, obviously, but even so, there was a minimum to that range. So the goal is to find your personal minimum and just try it out. Just try. As you try something for a period of time, pay attention to what's working. If you find that nothing's working, then maybe try changing one simple variable in what you're trying and see if that works. If it still doesn't work, maybe move on to trying something new. And finally, number 3, ditch the moral high ground. I'm going to try my best as much as possible to tone down, I guess, the kind of virtue signaling that goes along with these kinds of conversations sometimes. And I'm going to avoid talking about stuff as existing at the poles of like good versus bad. The intention of all of this information is just to provide applicable strategies to help you solve problems that you might be struggling with as it relates to your longevity. If you're not struggling with anything, stick around for the info, sure, but at the end of the day, do you. I'm actually a huge fan of agency, and I really do believe that ultimately you are the number one authority on, well, you. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, let's talk about sleep. So if you watched the first vid, you might already be picking this up about me, but I like definitions. I like clear parameters. So when I had the thought, what is sleep? I did what I usually do when I have a question that starts, what is ... And the search engine came back with a lot of definitions. Sleep is oftentimes defined as a naturally occurring neurological phenomenon involving a temporary but reversible loss of consciousness. That seems to fit the bill. Now, I for one made the rookie mistake of assuming that sleep was somehow exclusive to vertebrates. You know, recognizable animals, humans and other mammals or critters, creepy crawlers. Something I can look at and say that is an animal. I assumed that those were the creatures that slept. And if we go back to the definition of sleep, where it's described as a neurological phenomenon, I thought it was at least safe to assume that you needed a brain to sleep. But I was wrong. In fact, brainless jellyfish and sponges at the bottom of the sea sleep. And plants don't have brains, but they've also been observed exhibiting sleep-like behavior that adheres to a particular circadian rhythm. As it turns out, sleep may actually be the ultimate universal experience. To quote this neuroscientist out of Washington University, his name's Paul Wall. Not Paul Wall, Paul Shaw. If Paul Wall is a whole different story. But Paul Shaw was quoted as saying, "If it's alive, it sleeps." So this revelation obviously piqued my curiosity and made me want to go deeper into finding out, the origins of sleep. I mean, that obviously has implications dating back to the inception of our world. But why is this? Why do we sleep? Again, search engine, tick, 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 tick. And one of the things that bounced back at me was this book, Why We Sleep, by this guy, Matthew Walker. Obviously, I picked it up because, well, why we sleep. Now, this book is an excellent resource if this question has ever crossed your mind. Super rich in information, but I will warn you, it is a bit dense, let's say, with the sciencey stuff. And I love the sciencey stuff, but even I had to put it down every now and again and watch reality TV to balance things out. But one of the things discussed in this book, and something that I kept coming across as I did other research as well, was this idea of sleep doesn't really make a lot of sense evolutionarily if we think about it. I mean, here we are, every living thing sleeps, which means that likely every living thing has been sleeping since the dawn of time. But at face value, it's not exactly conducive to survival, is it? I mean, think about it. When you're sleeping, you're not eating or searching for food. You're not having sex, both of which are necessary to push the species forward. And you're very vulnerable as well. A predator can come and get you. Some freak accident that you didn't notice might befall you. Seems kind of dangerous to sleep from an evolutionary perspective. And yet, for billions of years, every living thing has done it. So that alone should indicate its importance. No, its necessity to our existence. And here's a couple of reasons why. Sleep is our #1 regenerative state. As we sleep, our brains and our bodies go through a restoration process involving a complex cascade of chemicals, some of which boost our immune systems, some of which regulate our hormones, some of which filter out waste products from our actual brains. Just the acts of living and of staying alive are stressful and rigorous ones. And all of us living things are in a constant process of managing the stress of daily life in order to maintain a very necessary, but also a very delicate balance with our health. So as the rigors of daily life tear us down, sleep is what helps all living things rebuild. In my family growing up, if I didn't feel good, either physically or mentally or emotionally, a lot of times the advice was sleep it off. It's a pretty common one, right? And you know what? It's not bad advice either, because the majority of the time, I wake up the next day feeling different, more often better. Because sleep is our own personal reset button. And yet, so many of us struggle with sleep. So, in approaching the strategies that we're going to talk about today, I had to break up sleep struggle into a few different categories. Number 1, the struggle to go to sleep. Number 2, the struggle to stay asleep. And number 3, struggles with sleep quality. And as mentioned in vid 1, the game plan is still to try to keep this stuff as digestible as possible, not overwhelm you with too much stuff all at once. So we've got 3 categories. So I'm going to discuss a strategy for each category, and we'll revisit these categories again every time we talk about the longevity pillar that is sleep. So, number 1, the struggle to go to sleep. This one right here, this is all me. Once I'm laid out, I'm good to go. I sleep pretty soundly. When I wake up in the morning, I typically wake up feeling like I've had a good night's rest. But it's the going to bed, the going to sleep, that's the hard part for me. Difficulties going to sleep are most often linked to our levels of excitability, either mental, physical, or a combination of the both, close to bedtime. Now, the physical part is a little bit easier to understand. Obviously, don't spike your heart rate doing 50 burpee backlifts before bed, but it's the mental excitability that's the especially tricky part. I mean, we've all felt it, where you're laying there, maybe your eyes are even closed, but those anxious thoughts going. Maybe you're thinking about what you have to do the next day for work. Maybe you're replaying an argument you had earlier in the day. For me personally, My mental excitability is exacerbated by typically one of two things. First one, bad reality TV. I know. But have you ever watched Below Deck? That show will just keep you in. And the second way, and possibly what you might be doing even right now, is this. Oh, I know. I can already hear the pushback. But Tam, I do everything with my phone. It's my clock, it's my calendar, it's my news feed, my personal organizer. But if it's excitability that's the problem, then we know how much this is to blame. Now I'm referencing the word excitability in both the literal and the figurative usage of the word. Literal in that excitability literally refers to the firing of electrical impulses, and this study found that cell phone emissions can literally increase the excitability of the electrical impulses within the brain. But also figuratively in terms of how we generally feel about our devices. Did you know that on average we touch our phones over 2,600 times a day? And if you're a heavy phone user, this number can more than double. We're talking about 1 to 2 million touches a year. Sounds pretty excitable. I mean, that's a lot of attention that we end up paying to these things. So they become one of the most excitable things in our lives. It's the modern era and we're obsessed with uber convenience, and our phones are the gateway to have everything that we want at a moment's notice with the touch of a screen. And if the counter argument is that, okay, Tam, I use my phone to relax though as well. I mean, I do that. I put on a sound bath on my phone. I put on a meditation. And it's not that those things are, again, good or bad, but it's the inevitability of distraction when it comes to our phones that's actually the hardest thing to manage. And a lot of the time, the things that we think we're doing to relax ourselves on these phones are just another version of excitability. I mean, stating the obvious, social media, whose platforms are engineered to grab and keep our attention for as long as possible. How many of us burn hours away winding down on social media at night? Now that's a lot of dopamine-fueled excitability when you're trying to wind down. And it's not like I'm not sympathetic to it. I absolutely am. I mean, here I am in this very moment, filming this very video on my phone. So I completely understand that we've become dependent on these inventions of convenience. If excitability is the problem, then we kind of have to figure out a way of making our phones less exciting to be able to detach from them. Now, this is not some novel discovery or anything. We have all these apps that exist now that are there to limit your screen time, focus mode on your phone. One common suggestion is to either leave your phone in another room or even go so far as put it in a lockbox if you're trying to not be on it at night. And I tried this one for a period of time, but inevitably there was some reason that I came up with to have my phone closer to me. And eventually I ended up justifying all those reasons in the name of either productivity or convenience. And even though I'm just using it for those morning notifications and my alarm clock, the snowball effect happens. Those apps flashing in my face. Next thing you know, I'm watching an ASMR of some dude in Korea making like 1,000 burgers at lunch shift. And the screen time blocker apps might work for you. I mean, try them out and see what happens. They do put roadblocks in your way to be able to delay the process of getting into Twitter or IG. But you can always, oftentimes, bypass those apps if you're determined enough to get on your phone to wind down. So we have to circle back to the excitability, because it's the excitability once you get into your phone that's going to delay your sleep process by minutes or hours. And as we'll talk about in more detail in the future, every one of those minutes and hours actually does count. I have a handful of early childhood memories, one of which was from when my parents were trying to wean me off bottles and get me to start drinking from sippy cups and regular cups. Super bizarre that I have this memory, but very clearly I remember one day my mom gave me a bottle with warm milk and I started to drink the bottle, and then next thing you know, the bottle's like kind of leaking everywhere. I looked down and I just remember feeling this distress, watching my bottle just leak all my milk onto the floor. And I remember being upset and showing my mom, and she was like, "Oh, it's broken. The bottle's broken. It doesn't hold milk anymore. Here you go. You can drink some warm milk from the sippy cup." And in that moment, I looked at my bottle leaking on the floor. I was pretty devastated, but because I couldn't drink the milk from my bottle anymore, all of a sudden my bottle seemed pretty boring. And the sippy cup over here that was holding the milk, which was the thing I was actually really excited about, the sippy cup was starting to become more interesting. And then I have a memory of the moment where I dropped the boring bottle and I went away with my sippy cup to become an adult. But my dependence on and my excitability around that bottle, my mom kind of snipped that by making my bottle undesirable. To break the excitability for my bottle, my mom had to make it boring. To break the excitability with your phone, you have to make your phone boring. You have to hijack your brain. Biohack number 1, enter Grayscale.
Grayscale is a color filter setting on your phone that turns your phone from this to this. You can turn grayscale on your phone either manually or automatically. So let's go over the steps for each and I'll tell you which one I think is better. To trigger grayscale manually on your iOS device, first navigate into your phone settings. From there, navigate to your accessibility tab. Within accessibility, find display and text size. Scroll down until you find your color filters. Then simply toggle on. Grayscale is usually the first selected. You can also set this up as a shortcut in your iOS device by going into settings again, finding your accessibility tab, then scrolling down until you find accessibility shortcut. From there, you can click on color filters. Setting this shortcut will now allow you the ability to manually trigger grayscale by triple clicking your side button, as shown here. To manually trigger grayscale on your Android device, go into your phone settings and click your accessibility tab. Scroll down until you find color in motion, and from there, navigate to color correction. Select grayscale. You'll also see the option to toggle on your color correction shortcut. Once set, you'll now be able to trigger grayscale on your Android device by swiping up with 2 fingers from the bottom. Now, though a decent argument can be made for both of these manual options, automating grayscale on your cell phone is by far the better choice in my opinion, when used as a tool to preserve sleep. To automatically trigger grayscale on your iOS device, you'll need to navigate to your phone's Shortcuts app. If you don't have the Shortcuts app on your phone, make sure to download it from your app store. Once within Shortcuts, scroll down until you see your Automations tab. Then, click on New Automation. You'll see this list of options pop up. From there, choose the sleep option. Okay, now that we're in the sleep section of our automations tab, let's take a second to talk about this section right here. These timing variables in the when section are all parameters that you can set within your iOS's Health app. So if you haven't already, take the time to set those up now before continuing with automation setup. Once you've set your schedule, from this list of options, choose Wind Down Begins. Then, from the bottom options, switch Run After Confirmation to Run Immediately. You want to make sure this one is clicked because after setting the automation, the idea is to interface with your phone as little as possible. And for this same reason, make sure that Notify When Run is also toggled off. Once we're all done here, we'll click Next, which will take us to this screen. Tap that little gray box that says New Blank Automation, and now we'll be able to add an action to the automation. So a search menu will pop up. I'm going to type in color filters, and then I will choose the Set Color Filters top option. So we're at the last step of this automation, and we have just set it up so that when our wind down starts, color filters will be turned on, which is what we want. We want for grayscale to come on when we're trying to wind down. And here is the automation that we've set up. But now we have to set the other end of the parameter. So we're actually going to go through these steps once again. We're going to hit the plus sign again, and then we will select the sleep tab. This time, from the list of top options, we're going to select Waking Up. Same as before with the bottom 2 options, we want to switch Run After Confirmation to Run Immediately, and we also want to make sure that Notify When Run is toggled off. Once we hit Next, we will be taken back to this screen where we can select our New Blank Automation, that gray box. We can then add our action. You're going to once again search for color filters. You're going to select Set Color Filters. This time around, we're going to turn color filters off, so that your phone will go from a brick overnight back into being a real phone in the morning when you wake up. So now you've set your grayscale to automatically come on when you're trying to wind down for the evening. The cool thing is that if you painstakingly manage to follow the steps to set this automation, you'll have an acute idea of how many steps it will take to undo it. This is the part of the hack that will most come in handy the next time that late night itch for a scroll threatens your sleep. Now, grayscale alone can be a game-changing hack if your device is part of what keeps you up at night. But if you want to know how much more simple and yet equally effective the other 2 hacks on this list are, well then,
few moments later.
Okay, so you've been rocking the grayscale for a couple of weeks now, and it's working. Those newspaper print TikTok reels just are not hitting like they used to hit. Everything's going right, and you're making it to bed earlier and earlier at night. You're giving yourself more and more opportunities a night to get those valuable hours. Then boom, It's 3 a.m. and your eyes snap open. And what's pulled you out this time? Is it the garbage truck pickup? Is it your neighbor who just got home from the club? Is it your bladder? All of a sudden, you are struggling to stay asleep. Now this constitutes sleep interruption, or sleep disturbance as it's sometimes called. And oftentimes, sleep interruption is linked to stimulus. This stimulus can come from outside of you, like the garbage truck pickup or your raver neighbor, or from inside of you by something that you've eaten, drank, sipped, or smoked. Biohack number 2, intentionally time your consumables. I am a thirsty girl, and sparkling water is my bevy of choice. There's just nothing like chugging a glass of bubbly water right before tucking in for the night. So crisp, the last palate cleanser for the evening. But then, like clockwork, somewhere between the hours of 4 and 5 a.m., nature calls. And the time it takes me to stumble out of bed, stumble over to do my business, and stumble back into bed might only be a few minutes. But the time it takes me to get back to sleep, now that's a crapshoot. Sure, sometimes it could be a few minutes, but on a bad night, maybe up to an hour. And since every minute and hour is valuable, that's just more missed opportunity to get my night's worth. Inevitably, I end up paying for that late night chug the next day. Now, lots of research has been done to determine the correct amount of time to stop consuming before bed. And the consensus is around 3 hours. That allows enough time to digest and eliminate, while shortening the window for hunger or thirst before you go to sleep. So the biohack is to time your consumables, such that you still get to have your evening goodies, while still giving yourself a spare 3 hours that won't cut into your overall time in bed. Now again, it's necessary to revisit the idea of agency. Then if you're dying of thirst and you need that glass of water before you settle in, then do it for sure. But just keep in mind that there might be consequences that lead to you waking up in the middle of the night. Oh man, is this starting to rain? Oh, dang. Okay, we are on the move. Lastly, sleep struggle number 3, struggles with sleep quality. Now this one is pretty darn important because it is the quality of our sleep, after all, that actually determines the benefits that we reap from it. 8 hours horizontal with your eyes closed sounds great, but if those 8 hours are fitful and fleeting, you're still gonna feel crappy the next day. Now, a good proportion of the time I've found through personal experience and also just from poring over the research on this stuff, if you manage to solve the first 2 struggles on our list, this third one will usually fall into place. But if that's not the case, gotta pause here for a second, it's starting to come down. If that's not the case, then biohack number 3 might help. Biohack number 3, use temperature wisely. Now back to our delightfully dense reading material. I may have forgotten to mention that Matthew Walker is not just some random sleep enthusiast who thinks dreams are super cool or anything like that. He's a whole sleep scientist, has a whole lab, and he runs frequent clinics to make all these observations. And the observations about temperature in regards to sleep quality are some of his most insistent. The science shows that our core body temperature actually directly influences our wakefulness and sleepiness. And to bring on and maintain sleep, our core body temperature needs to drop by about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit or 1 degree Celsius. So when trying to fall asleep at night, your bed and room should be cooler rather than cozy. The chilled environment is what promotes this core body temperature drop and starts to wind down our systems, lowering our heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate. And we can actually help this process along by adding heat before the cold. Hot baths and showers before bed don't just feel good, but they actually have a practical usage as well. As you heat up in the shower, your nervous system detects the rise in temperature and it actually starts to drop your core body temperature in an attempt to regulate this. By hopping freshly washed from a hot shower into a cool room in bed, you'll actually be giving yourself a head start to find slumber. Now that we know the simple hacks on this list, we should have even more of an awareness of how even the smallest of adjustments have the potential to have exponential effect on the longevity pillar that is sleep. Oi! So then, it looks like we got us a few things to try out. Let me know, do you identify with any of these sleep struggles? I mean, are you in my camp where it takes you a minute to settle down for bed, but once you're in bed, you're pretty good until the morning? That is if you don't make the mistake of chug-a-lugging right before bed and then have to end up getting up in the middle of the night, like I sometimes do. Or maybe you can get to bed on time and you manage to stay asleep all night, but for some reason you wake up in the morning and you still feel like trash. let me know in the comments which one of these is you. And bonus points if it's all three, because sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles. And you know what? Maybe you're already addressing these struggles with strategies of your own. If you are, then don't be shy. Leave those bad boys down in the comments as well. As I like to say, share and share alike. And if you've gotten this far in the video and you're wondering who I am and why I even care so much about any of this stuff at all, then go ahead and watch this video right here. See you at the next one.